Hey guys, here we are for chapter 12, section 2. We're going to talk about air, noise, and light pollution. So air, noise, and light pollution. Your essential question: what are 3 human health problems caused by noise pollution? All right, 3 of them, just noise pollution. But let's start right off into air pollution. Now, we looked at that a lot really last chapter coming in, but air pollution itself can cause serious health problems, especially for the very young, the very old, and those that actually have some sort of pre-existing condition like heart or lung problems. Now, air pollution adds to the effect of certain diseases like emphysema, heart disease, and lung cancer. So if you already have one of those or a predisposition, genetically in your family, air pollution exacerbates that problem dramatically. The American Lung Association has estimated that Americans pay tens of billions of dollars a year in health costs just to treat respiratory diseases caused by air pollution. If you're an asthmatic and you're buying medicine of any kind because of the quality of air isn't as good and helping you to breathe, this is what's going into it. So some of it has to do with surgery and whatnot, but anything to do with respiratory problems dealing with air pollution. Now, a picture back here, this is showing a smoker's lung versus a healthy lung. Now, granted, you don't have to smoke, but if you're in an area with high air pollution, boy, when we lived overseas, some of the cities we were in, the air pollution was really bad. The air quality was not good. And it can be very similar to having smoker's lungs. When you're breathing in bad air pollution all the time, now obviously somebody who is smoking is electing to put more pollutants into their lungs. But people that live in bad air quality cities or places where there's high levels of air pollution, their lungs can wind up looking a lot like a smoker's lung, and you can see why we wind up spending so much money on respiratory problems if we're breathing things in, causing our lungs to get gummed up. Now, we have short-term effects, we have long-term effects. Let's talk about some short-term effects of air pollution on health. Now, most of these effects of air pollution, you're having a hard time breathing. You think about being at a campfire, right? The smoke blows in your face. When you just get out of it, and all of a sudden, you're not choking, you're not coughing. And if you can get yourself away from the exposure to air pollution, then the problems tend to go away. The short-term effects of air pollution, now when we're talking air pollution, it could be just like smoke from a fire, but these are also chemicals. If you're at a gas station and pumping gas, those VOCs, volatile organic compounds, you're breathing in, you can get lightheaded. You go somewhere and maybe they're doing painting and you smell, ooh, wow, the vapors. Well, this is what we're talking about. So the short-term effects can just be things like headache, nausea, irritation to the eyes. You get that if you're in a campfire thing. Your nose and throat get irritated, you cough, you sneeze, tightness in the chest. Ooh, I feel like I can't breathe, I can't catch my breath. Upper respiratory infections, you wind up getting like bronchitis, pneumonia, things of this nature are brought about by exposure to air pollution. Once again, these tend to be short-term effects. If you can remove yourself from the source of the air pollutants, then these effects tend to go away. Now, air pollution also makes the conditions of asthma or emphysema much worse for individuals with them. So if you are somebody with asthma and you live in an area with very bad air quality, your asthma conditions tend to get worse. If you leave that and you go somewhere where there is good air quality, your conditions largely improve. So short-term versus long-term. You live in an area with very bad air quality all the time and you're exposed to it. You live in a big city with lots of pollution and smog and you're breathing it in constantly. Well, things that have been linked to long-term air pollution include emphysema. This is a problem where you can't breathe. You can't get enough oxygen in your lungs. lung cancer, and also heart disease. If you're not getting enough oxygen in, you can't cycle around as much, we wind up getting heart disease as well, which can lead to heart attacks and obviously death. All of these can lead to death. Long-term exposure to bad air pollution, may also worsen a lot of other medical conditions, especially those of the very young and the very old. They're a little more sensitive, and this is where it tends to cause a problem. Now, largely right now, I've been talking about outdoor air pollution, out there, whether it's smoke from a fire, whether it's chemicals from a gasoline or another factory of some kind, or it's pollution in the air, cars, factories, what have you. Well, we also have indoor air pollution. And sometimes the quality of air inside a home or a building can be worse than the quality of the air outside. Seems counterintuitive, but it's very true. And if you happen to live in the home or visited somebody who's a heavy smoker, you can kind of get the idea. You're in there, ooh, it's smoky and etc. You could be in somewhere where they heat their own home with fireplace, and it may get smoky or something. When I lived overseas, some of the homes had open hearth fireplaces, a fireplace in the middle of the floor. There was a little hole in the ceiling, and the buildings were very smoky, and you would get ash all over you. So not everybody is in the same situation as we are in America. But also, plastics and other chemicals actually are a major source of pollution. These things can be found in carpets, building materials, paints, furniture, especially when you buy these items new. You buy it new, you go, ooh, what's that kind of smell? Well, what it's been treated with, whether it's dyes or other things, these are going into the air and you're breathing them in on a regular basis. It even leads to something that we call sick building syndrome. Now, this is a set of symptoms that people get. A lot of times it's headache, fatigue, eye irritation, you can get dizziness, etc. In some of our modern buildings, they were built airtight. The idea is we're going to seal everything up airtight, and then when you come in, it'll be good. Well, the problem is we keep bringing pollutants into the building. The cleaning chemicals that they clean the building with at night. They're renovating floor 5, and while they're renovating floor 5, well, all that chemicals are going up into the air vents and circulating out through the building. So the air quality inside of these buildings is worse than it is outside. So people show up to work on Monday and they feel good, and Tuesday or Wednesday, my eyes are burning, kind of feeling a little tired, I've got a headache all the time, sick building syndrome. They go home and they come back in the morning and they kind of feel okay, but then it starts to come back. Once again, you can remove yourself from it, the symptoms go away, but you come back in it. But by the end of the week, it's building up. You go home for the weekend, and by Sunday afternoon, you're feeling sick building syndrome. It all comes from breathing in bad air all day in the office, if you will. This is most common in hot places where the buildings have been tightly sealed to keep out the heat. So it's all pumping the air conditioning. It does happen up north, but a lot of buildings up north are designed for the times of years when it's cooler to open the windows. But here in Florida and some of the buildings down south, it's hot all the time. And these things were built and designed to keep that from occurring. Now, identifying and removing the sources of indoor pollution is the best way to maintain good air quality. If we know there's an open container of benzene, well, it's leaking out. But this is in paints, right? Paints, dry cleaners, sometimes offices have a dry cleaner at the bottom, and the chemicals from the dry cleaner are evaporating into the air, into the building. So one of the best things we can actually do is vent or mix outdoor air with the indoor air to keep the quality of the air good. But especially when you have things like renovation going on, painting, anything that we know is going to cause indoor air pollution, we need ventilation to increase. Make sure we can open windows. But in some of these buildings where everything is really tightly sealed, it gets difficult. And it's just been a problem. It's something that we know about, we've identified it, and some of our brand new buildings are built to deal with it. But some of the buildings that were built before, like in the 80s, 90s, we've had to go back and try and retrofit them to deal with it. Another form of indoor air pollution that we get is radon gas. Now, radon gas, it is colorless, it is tasteless, odorless, but radioactive. It's a gas, radioactive. Radioactivity can wind up causing cancer when you get it. Now, radon is an element produced by the decay of uranium. Uranium is an element found in the Earth's crust. It's a naturally occurring element, but it is obviously radioactive. It's what we dig up to get nuclear fuel from. But it just decays in the gas and it leaks up out of the cracks. It can leak up into a building, and then what happens is it settles on a piece of dust, and I breathe the dust in. The dust goes into my lungs and it sits there, but it's radioactive. The dust isn't bothering me, but the radioactive radon is emitting radiation, and this can cause cell damage, and it can cause mutation. And cancer is when a cell doesn't know when to die. It lives longer than it should, it replicates, lives longer than it should, and we get tumors, and we call this cancer. So it seeps through the cracks, up through the holes, gets into your house, and unless you do some sort of test for radon, you don't know you have it. You can either wear the mask or you can have your house tested for radon. When I worked at Westwood Middle School a while back, it's been about a decade back, they found high levels of radon in some of the buildings, and they put radon detectors everywhere to make sure we could readily see it when it happens. You can't smell it, you can't taste it, you can't see it. Sometimes you don't know it's a problem until you're sick from it. Now, when people inhale the dust, once again, it comes in lines of passages, but it can get anywhere, in your nose, in your lungs, in your throat, down in your chest, into the lungs. And radon is actually the second leading cause of lung cancer in the United States. Number one, yeah, you guessed it, smoking. Of course, living in cities that have really bad air quality causes all of these problems to get worse. If you live in a city with bad air quality, you have a little bit of asthma, you're breathing in bad air, you might have some radon. Yeah, it can get bad really quick. Another one that we've identified as a problem is asbestos. Now, asbestos is actually several different silicates. It's a form of silicate minerals, but we form them in little tiny bundles of fibers. They are impervious to heat, they don't burn, they're very flexible, incredibly durable, and this was the wonder material of the 50s and 60s. We used it for insulation everywhere. It was incredible insulation. It was durable, it didn't go away, it was heat retardant, so it wouldn't catch fire, but then we found out that it leads towards cancer. What happens is it's an irritant. We used it in all kinds of building materials, but primarily insulation was kind of the worst, because insulation would break down into a dust form. Now, if it was in insulation, it wasn't a problem until somebody got up in the ceiling and started rooting around, and you stirred all that dust up and you breathe it in. Indoor air pollution again, right? It'd get stirred up and come out the vents and people would breathe it in. It gets hung up in your chest, and it's the little teeny tiny fibers. You get it in your chest and it sticks there, and it causes it to scar. Cancer basically forms one of three ways. It's always a mutation of a cell, but it's either by something radioactive, mutating the gene, a chemical that you're taking in. This is where smoking comes in. You're taking those chemicals in and they can affect it, or by physical rubbing and an irritant, and that's what asbestos is. So you could get cancer, like lung cancer, from smoking, largely chemical based. You could get lung cancer from radon, basically radioactive based mutation, or from physical scarring, and this is where asbestos kicks in. You breathe it in and it gets in there, it sticks in your lungs, and you keep, every time you breathe, it causes an irritant. And victims of this disease have more and more trouble breathing. The disease is asbestosis. You get too much of this in, and it causes a problem. It's not even necessarily lung cancer. You get enough causing scarring in your lung, and you get asbestosis, and you just have a hard time breathing. You have so much scar tissue, you can't get as much oxygen in. So, air pollution. We want to move on to noise pollution. Okay, noise pollution. Sound. A sound of any kind is called noise, right? You call it music, I call it noise. No, just kidding, but my dad used to say that when I was a kid, definitely. And a lot of times, some noises are just unnecessary, and then we call it noise pollution. It just kind of depends on how loud it is and if it's needed or not needed. If I need to hear it, then, you know, it's talking or music or what have you. But if it's just back there, it's noise, right? And the more noise we get causes higher decibel levels, and we can get health problems because of it. Now, some of the health problems from it, number one, in a sense, hearing loss. You can't hear anymore. It also causes high blood pressure and stress. You know, you keep hearing, and a lot of times what's happening is in the background. You don't really realize it until you get away from it. You go, oh, that's really nice. It's quiet. It's quiet. Yeah, it's kind of nice from time to time. Now, noise can have a negative impact on organisms on the land, like you and me and a squirrel or a raccoon, but also on organisms in the ocean. Loud sounds have been known to cause whales and dolphins to become stranded up on a beach. Sometimes when we get a whole pod of whale or dolphin come up and get stranded, it's because we've gone back and found out, ooh, they're doing some kind of weird sonar test or these really loud tests of something under the water, and it disrupts their ability to hear and process. And sometimes we wind up getting entire pods of whales or dolphins beaching because of noise pollution. Now, a decibel is the most common unit to measure loudness, and it's abbreviated by little d, capital B, decibel. Now, the quietest sound that a human can hear is represented by 0 decibel. Well, technically 0, but down, this is the lowest level. Now, you and I are never exposed to this. We have constant sound. Lights are giving off sound. There's air conditioners in the background, cars nearby. It's really difficult to get anywhere that gets below about a 30 in a modern world. But even if you're outside in nature, you know, water going by. But anyway, you're in a soundproof kind of room, and you could hear something as quiet down to 0. For each increase in a decibel intensity, the decibel level is 10 times higher than the previous level. You know, 0 to 1 to 10 times each one. A sound of 120 decibels is the threshold of pain. You turn up your music with your ear pods in, and you can get up above 120. This is where you take them off and your ears are ringing a little bit. It's been too loud. Constant exposure or continuous exposure to sounds over 120 decibels, this can lead to permanent ear loss. Now, if you look at the chart up here, we're going to do a lab tomorrow that deals with decibel. So you want to download a decibel meter. But let's look at a few of them. A rocket engine, around 180 decibels. A jet engine. This is why guys out at the airport have their headphones on. They're noise canceling headphones, because 140, it's above this threshold of pain. A rock concert, and if you've ever gone to a concert and you're coming home and your ears are kind of ringing, you've been exposed to a level that can cause permanent damage. Car horn around 110, chainsaw, portable, etc., etc. The chart. Now, this is kind of a duration, if you will. You're exposed to things. Well, if it's at a sound level of about 90, well, you can go at 90 for about 8 hours before causing permanent damage. This would be a lawnmower. Well, it's loud, but it's not going to cause permanent damage. Now, you're mowing a lawn more than 8 hours, you got one heck of a big yard. You work in the lawn service or something. More than 8 hours, it can begin to cause damage. 95, notice it's only safe for 4 hours. You get up to 100, only 2 hours. 115, 15 minutes. So yeah, you've been at a rock concert that's at 120 for 2 hours. There's probably some permanent damage going on. Now what happens with this damage, if you will, is it comes down to hearing in your ears. You have your eardrums, and they're little membranes, and they boom, 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 like a drum, literally. If they get split, then that would be really loud sound, but that will grow over and heal. Inside of your inner ear, you got these teeny tiny little hairs. Those teeny tiny little hairs, now you have 100,000 of them or so in your ear canal, but when those get damaged, they don't grow back. So what happens is you listen to something really loud and it breaks several of those hairs. You don't really notice it the next day, but you get to be my age and you lose 10 hairs here, 10 hairs there, 5 hairs there, 3 hairs there, 10 here, and all of a sudden, what? What'd you say? Can't hear you. Yeah, it's a progression. And this is why people, when they're older, often can't hear as well. It's not because of anything they've done now, it's stuff they did when they were young. So take note, be careful of your hearing, because this is the kind of thing, once you damage those hairs in your ear, there's nothing you can do, and it's collective. You can damage some now and you won't really notice, but when enough of them get damaged along the way, hearing tends to suffer. Last one we're going to talk about is light pollution. Light pollution. Now, light pollution, this is, once again, too much light, but normally we're just talking about when you can't get any dark, when you can't get away from light. In a lot of our big cities with street lights, etc., there's light all the time. Light pollution can lead to increases in headaches, fatigue. You can't really sleep well. You can't get a good night's sleep. Stress and anxiety. It also tends to negatively affect our environment. Sea turtles, other things because of it. The use of inefficient lighting in urban areas also diminishes our view of the night sky. You go out, when I get out and I'm going camping and I'm completely away from anything, I look up and I can see the Milky Way, especially if it's a moonless night, you can see the Milky Way. Here in town, I live in Gainesville, Florida. It's not a big town. Still can't see the Milky Way. I see a glow all around me of the street lights. This is light pollution. But in urban areas, that's the thing. The sky around us is often so much brighter than the natural sky. We can't see it. You can't see as many stars, and you definitely can't see the Milky Way. Now, environmentally speaking, our biggest concern is inefficient lighting, because it's just wasted energy. I put on a light, well, I'm trying to light the ground. And if the light's escaping up into the, it's not doing any good. It's just wasted money, wasted energy. We want to direct the light exactly where we want it. If I'm trying to light the ground, I want to shield it so the light's hitting the ground, not up there. That's why a lot of our lights have those reflective materials. I don't want light back here. I want it where it goes. So lighting on billboards that's shining up and then it's going up into the night sky, there's a lot of waste. We need to have the lights hitting down so it's on the billboard and not anywhere else. So we want to shield the light, and we want to use more efficient lighting, LEDs. Man, in your house, you shouldn't be using anything but an LED light bulb. They last for like 20 years and they use as little as or 90% less energy than a standard 100-watt light bulb. Switch to LEDs. They're more expensive at the beginning, but they're cheaper in the long run by a lot. You're using less energy and the light bulb lasts so much longer. Regular light bulb, you're lucky to get a year, maybe 2, if you're not using it a lot. But a LED, 20 years solid. I've had one in my house for going on 25 years now, and it's yet to burn out. So I'm still kind of waiting to see how long it's going to last. Now, I have had another one that burned out. I only had it about 10 years. So, between the two. Guys, that wraps it up for our discussion on different pollutions. Come back, and we'll see you next time.